What an incredible weekend of football we've got this week in the Premier League. On Sunday, it is the North London derby. I think the game with the most needle in the Premier League, I would say. I think it is. Over the last 5-6 years, it is a spicy one, I have to say. Last 4 meetings between these two. Arsenal with a 2-1 win. Arsenal with a 3-1 win. Spurs winning that big game at the back end of last season. You remember 3-0. Was it Rob Holding got sent off? And Arsenal beating Spurs earlier in the season at home 3-1. So Spurs, I do a podcast with a Spurs fan, and he's very up and down, I must be honest. But he's also kind of just so sick of the sort of Jekyll and Hyde of Tottenham. Over the last,
That's a long-term thing, I would guess.
Yeah. But I think specifically the first half and the second half of football matches. We're going to get into we've got a list of key battles here, and we'll sort of dive into them. But is the first and most important thing turning up in that first half for Spurs in this game? Because Arsenal have been really, really impressive in the first half of games this season. And I think you saw that. They kind of blew them away. And in a game like this, of this magnitude, where Spurs are now getting to a point where, yes, they'd like to get in the Champions League, but deep down, the main thing they care about, it's true, isn't it? The main thing you lot care about is Arsenal not winning the title. And we've got a situation here where they could lose to Arsenal and then beat Man City twice in a week, which is not what they want to happen. So is the most important thing, forget all these key battles, just starting in that first half with a bit more energy, or does that go against what Conte believes?
I mean, he's going to have to, if that is against what he believes, he's going to have to change it, because Arteta is like a hybrid of Pep and Klopp. His team can play in bursts, but they're tactically so versatile. Spurs, on the other hand, they just can't get going in games, and we've got the stats in front of us. Arsenal in the first half, 0.94 goals per first half, so it's almost a guaranteed score. I just think Spurs, in Roy Keane's words, just make a tackle.
Nice try.
They're just really slow and passive in games, and I think that plays right into Arsenal's hands, because Arsenal will be high octane and get after Spurs, and I think that Spurs midfield and that back line is just, I mean, I'm looking at their injuries now, and I just think that back four, back six is going to get demolished by Arsenal's front line.
It does feel that clear cut to you? Because I think here's the thing with me, especially with a derby game. When you're at home, it makes a huge difference. I think it makes such a big difference, and I think for the spectacles of both those games, the Manchester derby and this one, I think the right team's at home, because I think the favourite's obviously playing away, and I feel like I can't see Spurs with their fan base in that stadium against that team being as bleak as they've been in the first half of games. Or is it something you just can't turn a switch on, or can you? What do you think?
I think it may be the reason they are going to be as bleak, because I think they're going to be apprehensive about everything going wrong for them, and chatting to producer Tom outside as a Spurs fan, and he's terrified of everything going wrong as well. So because it's their biggest fear, isn't it? Arsenal win the league this year, and look, I just can't see past the mismatch of Martinelli versus Doherty. He's one of the best dribblers in the league, and Spurs do not look comfortable defensively with the injuries and so on. And I don't know. I think the general feeling for Spurs amongst the fans of the game, it'll be one of apprehension, and I think it will feed into a relatively unconfident Spurs side as well. And that first half goal, if it comes, which I think it will do statistically, says he's going to, it could be quite messy after that.
Yeah, see, I feel differently. I've got to be honest. I don't think it's as that feels too simple to me. I just think that Arsenal, especially after.
I want to be wrong.
The tiniest element of a crack, and the Newcastle game, they actually played well, but the results do affect your mindset a little bit. And it being a draw and them not scoring, I think that's just a little dust of doubt for them. In terms of that battle of Martinelli on that left hand side, do you think that is the key area here? Because there's a few.
I think it's actually the other side. I think Christian Romero is pretty good at defending in wide areas, and for the most part, Spurs are actually all right down that side, which is why you can say to Doherty, you go forward and do your job. I think the other side, where Clement Longley and Perisic will have to come up against Saka, I think they'll have a big problem there, which you saw against Newcastle in the first 15 minutes. Newcastle actually said, let's focus on Martinelli and stop him, and Saka had the run on Dan Burn 4 or 5 times, and then every time after that Saka got the ball, Dan Burn was screaming for players to come and overload. It was 3-on-1 every single time, and Ben White's not going to push on in that situation. And so then I think they managed to handle him. I think if Spurs focus too much energy on Martinelli, they probably leave the more deadly winger free. I think Saka's certainly better in front of goal, makes slightly better decisions when he's in and around the box than what, say, Martinelli does. My thing with what you were just saying then, though, which is really interesting, is this game actually probably works in Conte's favour, where Spurs fans might not get annoyed at him going, we're going to sit back and we're going to try pinch it on the counter, which is what he's done against City before, and it has worked.
Yeah.
And I think he might go, hey, this is a bit of a free shot for me. We don't have to play well. They might play really well, but if we leave 1-0, that's all our fans care about.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think that this sounds weird, but they have to proactively sit back, if that makes sense. So that happens in two ways. It's one, being careful with your defensive line and being assertive with it, because in that first game against Arsenal, they were so deep that they weren't able to play the ball through midfield whatsoever, despite having Bentancur, who might not be fit. I think Spurs fans generally think that he will be fit for this one. But they were just then playing these long balls. Whereas when Spurs are at their best against good sides who are good in possession, it's about being proactive when you do get the ball and be able to move the ball quickly. In terms of key battles, I think one big one for me is, we've got here Martinelli versus Doherty and Romero as a two on that side. I actually go to the other side of the pitch and Heung-min Son, who, it's a legitimate question, certainly once Richarlison's back fit, to drop Son, which blows my mind. But he's in really terrible form right now. But again, I think it just gets washed away when you come into a derby game like this. And if Harry Kane was outrageous against Crystal Palace in the second half of that game.
He just decided he was going to win the game.
He said, I'll do it then. Yeah, he did. And in terms of doing it, he does it against Arsenal time and time again. 14 goals against them. It's only two teams who's got more goals against Everton and Leicester, 15 and 20. I can still see that link up, which has always been their deadliest weapon, of get the ball to Kane, let him be strong. He's going to win some fouls, it gets you up the pitch, but also, play that ball into Son.
Against City all the time.
Yeah, can Ben White, and also importantly, it'll be William Saliba on that left hand side. The two centre backs are still young, and I think on occasion have got away with a couple of things. I think it might have been Gabriel gave away a penalty in that first game.
Also the Leeds game as well.
Maybe I'm thinking of the Leeds game. Yeah, white tops. So I think that's going to be a crucial area. Final area, which I think is really important, is going to be the midfield, because I think the difficulty for Arsenal is at Tottenham Stadium. Can they? Because every time they give away the ball, there's just going to be this outrageous roar. So can they? The likes of Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, players that I think people have been pleased with. Now you're getting to a point where at the start of what is a title run, these guys have got to step up and be champions. Do you think that Odegaard? There's been a lot of comparisons with KDB. Do you think he's getting to that level?
Well, he's not at that level yet, simply because he hasn't proven he's at that level yet, and that only comes with games like this. Yeah, exactly. And this is it, and this is in many ways fairly or not a bit of a litmus test for Arsenal, and they will know that as well. So maybe that is where the expectation comes in. What we've talked about so many times, and a billion pundits have, and so on. Arsenal, this is probably the start of the pressure. If they can go away at Spurs and they can get a result, fair play to them. But it could be a step too far, and they've got a young team, a relatively inexperienced team, and there's a lot of quality there. But this, despite what I said before, the pressure is still on Arsenal. It is. It's more on Arsenal than it is on Spurs, because Spurs are desperately hoping Arsenal don't win, but Arsenal feel like they need to. And that, to me, especially given the Newcastle game where there was frustration as well, that it could play into it an awful lot. And at some point, Arsenal are going to drop points when they don't want to. And this could be that game. And I guess we'll have to see how they respond to it if that happens. But Odegaard, he has been brilliant. He's been immense. He probably does have the magic, and it's a functional midfield for Spurs, isn't it? It's a hard working midfield, but is it going to be enough to?
Yeah, I think there's been decisions to be made there. We've got Bentancur coming back. Skip's not done too much and doesn't do that much offensively for them. Højbjerg's probably going to play. Basum's probably going to play defensively. Pape Matar has been quite impressive for them as well, and Conte seems to like it as well. So that midfield, regardless though, is going to be pretty functional. Final player I wanted to talk to you about was Nketiah.
Your boy.
My guy. Because I think there are just sometimes those players who pop up in the right positions. And actually the goals that he scored, it's only been a couple of course, but the goals that he scored have been those kind of goals where he's there at the right time. This is a huge game for him, both in terms of finding those goals, but also his link-up play for the team as well.
He's an out-and-out striker. He's a fox in the box, a bit of a throwback striker. He wants the ball to his feet. I think, it was the game he first played in where he got the ball, rolled the defender, and put it in the far corner. It was a real old school.
Brighton, I want to say.
Brighton?
Yeah.
It's an old school centre forward sort of goal where He wasn't thinking about flicking it round him or anything like that. And I think in one way that's very beneficial that Arsenal now have a bit of a focal point. And in another way, in a game against Spurs where you're going to need loads of movement off the ball like we saw against Newcastle, he might find it a little bit difficult to get involved in the game. And I think against Newcastle, he sort of dropped off and decided, I might try and be the build-up man. I think very quickly realised, it's not really me. I am the guy in the box. I shouldn't be dropping off to try and play 1-2s. I think he's got a massively important role, though. These sort of games get decided by a goal at the back post or someone winning a penalty or someone being a nuisance in the penalty area. This sort of game actually does suit him quite nicely. And for the most part, to be fair to him, 4 goals in his last 3 games in all comps, he has done the job which you said he would do, which was turn up and just get goals.
He's ready for it as well. We forget because the narrative around him. He's nearly 24 at the end of the season.
Yeah.
He's got over 100 appearances for Arsenal. This is his 6th season as an Arsenal player. Wow. It does not feel that way at all. But that's an awful lot of experience, and he's been around on that journey and he's been learning. And so this shouldn't really get to him too much, because he is used to being around there. This is not an 18-year-old kid, even though the narrative feels that way. This is a guy who's used to playing for a big side.
I think his hold-up play is actually getting better and better. I thought it was good against Newcastle. The problem I have with him in this game, in terms of that element of his makeup, is that I think it's going to be so congested in that Tottenham midfield.
That Jesus magic would be great, wouldn't it, for them?
Yeah, in terms of creating those overloads and just a little bit of chaos maybe as well. And so that is a shame that they don't have him. But I do think he is more of a poacher. And so he's either... I think Arsenal fans will either be frustrated by him or absolutely jubilant with him because I think he might get himself a goal. Let's do predictions. North London derby. I'll go first. I think my head says 1-1. My gut says 2-1 Arsenal.
I'm going 1-1. I don't think Arsenal are going to win.
I'm hoping for 1-1 as well. City fan, do you
think that's going to happen?
But no, I don't. I think they're going to win, and it's going to drive me mad because I think City are going to lose. It's going to be a horrible weekend, and Arsenal will let me know. There's a real good chance for 1-0. I think there is. I think.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
All 3 of us, 1-0. What do you think? Let us know in the comments down below.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.